It was supposed to be a perfect weekend. 4 of us, Mark, Jess, Tom, and I, had planned a camping trip deep in the Pinewood Forest. We all wanted to get away from the noise of the city and spend a couple of days in nature, just us and the wilderness. Mark, who always took the lead, had chosen the spot, a remote area near a small, hidden lake, miles away from any other human being. We arrived at the campsite late in the afternoon. The pines towered over us, their tops lost in a blanket of gray clouds. The air was crisp, a kind of cold that hinted at how freezing the night would be. Mist curled around our ankles, snaking across the forest floor, like it had a mind of its own. "This place is perfect," Mark said, dropping his backpack with a grin. "No cell service, no other people. Just peace and quiet." Jess, ever the cautious one, glanced around, her brow furrowed. "It's really quiet," she said softly, almost like she was afraid the trees might hear her. Tom laughed. "Exactly, Jess. No noise, no distractions. This is exactly what we wanted." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off. We quickly set up our tents as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky a deep orange. As darkness fell, we gathered around the campfire, the only light against the pressing shadows of the forest. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, though. The forest was too quiet, the silence too thick. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling like something was watching us. Then I heard it for the first time. A faint whisper. I turned my head, trying to listen, but the words were too soft, too far away. "Did anyone else hear that?" I asked. Mark looked up from the fire, his eyes curious. "Hear what?" "Whispering," I said. "It sounded like whispering." Tom rolled his eyes and grinned. "It's just the wind, Sarah. Relax." But it didn't sound like wind. It was different. Not a steady rustle of leaves, but soft and intermittent, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. Night fell quickly, and the blackness was like a shroud over the forest. The fire seemed to shrink under the weight of the dark, its light barely reaching beyond our small circle. We tried to distract ourselves with stories, most of them about old urban legends, and laughter that sounded forced and hollow in the dense night air. Then I heard it again, a twig snapping nearby. We all fell silent, looking at each other. "What was that?" Jess asked, her voice tight with fear. Mark waved his hand dismissively. "Probably just an animal." "Maybe," Tom added, but there was an edge to his voice. We sat in tense silence, listening, but there were no more noises, just the crackling of the fire and the far-off hoot of an owl. I tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The whispering started again, louder this time. I turned my head, straining to make out the words, but it was still too faint. "Did you hear it?" I asked again, more urgently. Mark was about to tease me when he froze. He had heard it too. We all had. It was clearer now, more like a hushed conversation happening just beyond the firelight. What is that?" Jess whispered. Mark stood up, grabbing his flashlight. "It's probably just the wind or maybe someone else camping nearby." "There's no one else out here," Tom said, his voice barely more than a breath. I checked. "We're alone." Mark hesitated, the flashlight beam shaking slightly in his hand. "I'll go check it out," he said, trying to sound braver than he looked. He took a few steps toward the trees, the whispering growing louder in our ears, but as soon as he reached the edge of the light, it stopped. Silence. Mark turned back, forcing a smile. "See?" "Nothing," he said, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. We decided to call it a night, each of us retreating to our tents. But sleep didn't come easy. I lay on my sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling of my tent, listening. The whispering had stopped, but the silence was worse. I felt the weight of the dark pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. Then, I heard it again, closer this time. A branch snapped outside my tent. I held my breath, heart pounding in my ears. "Mark?" I whispered. "Is that you?" No answer. Then, the whispering returned, louder, more insistent. "Come out!" it hissed, just outside my tent flap. I bolted upright, scrambling for my flashlight. I unzipped the tent door just a crack, shining the light outside. The mist swirled in the cold air, but there was nothing there. I sat back, trying to calm my racing heart. I must have imagined it. It had to be my mind playing tricks. I lay back down, but the whispers came again, louder, right outside my tent. "Come out!" I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and burst out of my tent, almost colliding with Jess, who was pale and trembling. "What happened?" I gasped. "It was in my tent," she cried, pointing behind her. Mark and Tom were up now, their faces drawn with fear. "What did you see?" Mark demanded. "I don't know," Jess stammered. A face right outside my tent." Tom looked uneasy. "Maybe it was a shadow." "No," Jess snapped. "It was real. I saw it, right outside my tent." I felt a chill run down my spine. I heard whispering, I confessed. Something telling me to come out. Mark took charge, but his voice shook. "This is just our minds playing tricks. The dark, the isolation." A loud crack interrupted him, followed by a deep, guttural growl. We turned, flashlights darting through the darkness. There, at the edge of the light, something moved. A tall, thin shape darting between the trees. Tom swore under his breath. What was that?" We stood frozen, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The whispers began again, this time louder, surrounding us, coming from every direction. The air grew colder, our breath visible in the flashlight beams. "Maybe we should leave," Mark suggested, his confidence gone. Before I could respond, the whispering stopped. The silence was deafening. Then a voice boomed out from the darkness, low and malevolent. "You should not have come here." Panic took over. "Run!" Mark shouted. We grabbed whatever we could and sprinted through the dense undergrowth. The trees seemed to close in on us, their branches tearing at our clothes, our skin. The whispers followed, louder, frenzied, chasing us. I stumbled, and Mark caught me. "Come on," he urged, pulling me to my feet. We ran until we couldn't hear the whispers anymore, until our lungs burned and our legs felt like they would give out. Finally, we stopped in a small clearing, panting, our eyes wild. What was that?" Jess gasped, clutching her chest. "I don't know," Mark admitted, looking over his shoulder, his face pale. "But we need to keep moving. We need to find the road." We kept walking, slower this time, every noise making us jump. The forest felt darker, more sinister, and the mist thicker, making it hard to see. Then we heard it again, the whispering closer this time. We picked up our pace, fear driving us forward. Tom stumbled and fell. "Wait!" he cried. But we didn't stop. I turned just in time to see him disappear, swallowed by the mist. "Tom!" I screamed, my voice breaking. No answer, only the whispering, louder now, almost mocking. Mark grabbed my arm. "We can't stay here. We have to go." "But Tom..." "He's gone, Sarah. We have to go," Mark shouted, his voice desperate. We ran again, not daring to look back. The forest seemed endless, a maze of trees and shadows. The whispers chased us, growing louder and louder, until they were a deafening roar in my ears. Finally, the trees parted, and we stumbled onto the dirt road. Relief washed over use, but it didn't last. The whispers were still there, closer than ever. We ran down the road, terrified. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, a cacophony of voices all around us. Then, I saw it, our car, parked at the trailhead. We sprinted toward it, fumbling with the keys. Come on, Jess urged, panic in her voice. Mark got the door open, and we piled in, slamming the door shut. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life. We sped down the road, headlights cutting through the darkness. The whispering faded behind us, replaced by the sound of our ragged breathing. We didn't stop until we were miles away, back on the highway, the forest a distant, dark shadow in the rearview mirror. We never spoke of what happened again. We didn't need to. We all knew something evil lurked in Pinewood Forest, something that had awakened the moment we entered its domain. But weeks later, the whispers started again. At first, they were faint, almost like a memory. But now they are growing louder, and I fear that they will never stop. I fear that Pinewood Forest will never let me go.